Absolutely.
All right, we are the HIT PCA group, and I am Mark Turchik. I started working at Batteries Plus Bulbs last summer as a software development intern, and I was hired on full-time, and I'm currently working as a full-time developer. I chose this project because it's written in .NET Core, and that's what I'm most familiar with developing. I was the Scrum Master this semester for our team.
Hi, my name is Tyler Kelly. I am actively looking for an internship at this time, and I just have one more semester here at WCTC.
Hello, my name is Sam Marshall. I was a researcher at the Medical College of Wisconsin with a background in microbiology. I came to WCTC to learn more in coding as it's one of my passions, and I chose this project to get more practice in .NET Core. I have an internship with IO Technologies starting next week.
Hi, I'm Mary Hughes. I earned my original degree in computer science from a four-year university and worked in the field for a number of years before turning my hand to writing. Now, with my book series coming to an end and with the exciting advances in the IT industry, I decided to get back into the field, and I chose WCTC to bring me up to date and my skills up to date. I have an internship at Exonia Bank this summer and will graduate in August. Our product owner is Angela Lee. Angela Lee is a health information technology instructor at WCTC and the Health Information Technology Program Coordinator. Electronic health records. Electronic health records, or EHR, are an electronic version of a patient medical history, an essential component of quality patient healthcare. To get complete training, WCTC healthcare students in a variety of programs need to practice entering, maintaining, and working with electronic medical records. But currently, students must purchase access to an EHR system in order to complete their schoolwork. This is not ideal. Product owner Angela Lee is partnering with Business Information Technology Capstone students to produce an in-house system to address this issue. The Health Information Technology, or HIT system, is an electronic health record system for academic training purposes. Tyler?
Thank you, Mary. So when we picked up this program, it included a patient search, create, and maintenance for the patient, as well as encounter maintenance. You can think of an encounter as when a patient seeks any kind of medical care. So they're going into the doctor's office or a hospital. And they also had just one administration screen. We were tasked to add in the patient care assessment, or PCA for short. The patient care assessment is when you sit down with a healthcare professional who takes your temperature, your height, your weight, and other information called vitals. They'll ask about your pain level and may ask specific questions that are about a particular system called a systems review. The PCA piece was designed primarily for the nursing student program and was developed from the nursing department. Because this is an evolving system, our objective was to make our portion not only useful, easy, and intuitive, but also adaptable. To achieve this, we added 3 new sets of managed data and administration pages. We have improved the website by adding adding links in the header to navigate the website. We also added a banner with important information about the patient that also includes alerts that we have on the right. These alerts change color depending on if the patient actually has any or if they don't. Red if they do, yellow if they don't. An alert, for example, can be something like if they have a risk or a high risk of fall. This banner displays over every page for the patient so that the nurse or the student is sure of what patient information that they're accessing. In the original system, there was a separate page that listed each of the patient's encounters. we've moved this list of encounters to display on the patient page so that they are more readily accessible. The number that is displayed by default is only limited to 5, but there is a button on the bottom that actually allows you to see more. And I will head off to Sam.
Here on this page, we have an encounter for a patient. The improvements made to the patient page have also been added to the encounter page, with pertinent information being shown about that specific encounter. At the bottom of the encounter page, we have the list of the patient care assessments that are for this encounter, that are listed similarly to how the list of encounters are set up. For each of the patient care assessments shown, we have the date the vitals were entered, along with pertinent vital information. On the left side for each of the patient care assessment, we have a view button. This view button will show in-depth information about that specific PCA. So we will start our demo from here and creating a new PCA. So we will click on the aptly named Create New PCA button.
Sometimes got to give it a second.
In a PCA, we have 3 sections of the form, as Tyler had previously mentioned, which are logically grouped based on how a PCA would be done. All of these sections are optional, which allows a nursing staff to start a PCA and come back later to update and add to that PCA, except for a pain assessment. This first page, the vitals, was ordered based on feedback from the nursing staff. For some of these, we have a section where you can, let's say, weight, you can modify what the units are for that specific vital. In addition, we have for a route taken, we can set so that whatever the route was used to take that vital, we can mark down in the PCA. On the far left, we have informational buttons that when hovered can show the within normal limits for each of that vital information. For the BMI, the body mass index, we have a link to a calculator, to an NIH Gov website calculator to calculate the body mass index, which can then be calculated and inputted into that field. At the bottom of the vitals page, we have the vital notes section, which is a paragraph entry format to note any abnormal conditions in the vitals. Let's head into the second portion of the PCA, which is the pain assessment. In the pain assessment, we have three unique pain scales, which is the Wong-Baker, the CRIES scale, and the nonverbal pain assessment. Each one of these has an informational button which provides additional information about that specific pain assessment, pain scale. The first pain scale we have is the Wong-Baker Faces scale. This is what you would most commonly see at a doctor's office. The pain score is based on 0 through 10 values, with a specific value being associated with a face. The second pain scale we have is CRIES. This is for very young children. This has multiple sections with values between 0 and 2, which are added up to a final pain score value. Similarly, we have the nonverbal pain assessment, which is for patients that are not able to communicate or unconscious, which has a similar setup as a CRIES with multiple sections 0 through 2, which are added up to a total. In the top right, we have a pain goal, which is what the nursing staff would want to get the patient down to by the end of the encounter. For validation, if the assessment that is selected is not fully filled in, the PCA will not submit until everything is completed. Now let's head on to the final section of the PCA, the systems review. The systems review is broken up into sections which are correlated, such as head, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and neck being in one section. Each one of these has 3 unique values, not assessed, within normal limits, and abnormal. These are defaulted to not assessed when in creation to allow for the all categories being optional. If abnormal is selected, you must fill in a description for that abnormality. If an abnormality is not filled in, then it will not submit. On the far left, we have informational buttons, which show what the within normal limits are for each of these sections if they are assessed. Once done with the PCA, we would hit the Save and Close Assessment button. And I will pass it off to Mark.
So after the PCA is saved, the nurse or student is brought back to this page to review the information they just entered. At the top, we display the vital information with the route and unit shown next to the related data. Any of the 3 sections that were not filled in are hidden, so we did not enter a pain note or a vital note here, so that table will not show. The pain goal and pain actual are shown next to each other. The pain actual is the pain score, or the sum of all the parameters in the pain scale. So for that FACES scale, it would be the added up value of all 5 of those. And we just display that so that the person looking at this does not have to do that math. The systems review assessments are all grouped by the tab that they are shown under. We display the parameter information and whether it was within normal limits alongside whatever abnormal comment that was left. One of the requirements was to allow for a partial save anywhere along the entry stage. So we have this update PCA button, and this brings us back to the form with all of the previously entered information. In here, we can change around or add any other information that we may have missed the first go around. The only thing different from this to the entry is that the pain scale is uneditable. After the PCA is initially made with a pain scale, we do not want to allow them to make a new one, as that would fall under a different PCA rather than making or editing an existing one. So if we click save here, we can see that that route that I changed real quick, if you missed it, is updated. That is the full life cycle of PCA entry, viewing, and updating. I'll hand it off to Mary now.
While Mark is logging in as administration, I'd like to pose a few questions. We've seen ways to add and change the patient care assessment information, but what if there's a new pain scale, or the guidelines are updated? Or what if we want to completely rewrite that 3rd tab of systems review? We're going to show you 2 ways our system keeps not just the PCA, but the PCA form current. So I'm going to have 2 examples. Let's say we noticed axillary under temperature route was misspelled. And secondly, let's say we want to add a new systems review called joints, and the question under that is going to be range of motion. Normally, this is set in code and requires an extensive amount of time and cost to update. But ours is data-driven. It's flexible and puts the power in the hands of the administrator. Okay, we're into the administrator tools, and we want to change the temperature route, so we go into PCA structured data, temp route type, And these are all of the drop downs in the PCA, in the patient care assessment. So temp route type, and we see our axillary is there with only one L. So we edit it. And we update it to add the second L and save it. And we'll see what effect this has in just a moment. Okay, now to add a whole new joint system, we go back to the index, and this time we're going to choose care system type. Here we see the 9 existing systems under that third tab listed. We're going to create a new one, and we're going to call it joints. Click create to save. Now we need to, and you can see that it's been added to the list. Now we need to add the question under the joints tab. So we go to care system parameter. And these are all the parameters listed by care system type. We're going to create a new one. And we're going to call it range of motion. For the description, let's enter 0 to 130 degrees, which is a normal joint range of motion. Now to join it up with our joints system, we go to the drop-down and choose our newly made joints and click create. And here you can see it is now on the list. But what effect has that had on the PCA? Well, why don't we go back to the patient encounter? Let's create a new PCA. Let's check our temp route type. Axillary is now correctly spelled. Okay, let's go to the systems review tab. Instead of 9 tabs, systems, there are now 10, including our new joints. When we click on it, we see our new question, range of motion, with the 3 answers defaulting and already existing. Clicking on the I informational button shows the normal limits help that we entered. And we did this all without changing a line of code. Sam?
We've worked hard to create a system that's easy on the user and also enhanced with future extensions in mind. We've worked with Angela Lee in the nursing department to make a cost-effective application to allow assessments to be performed and recorded, and to give students an opportunity to practice with an electronic health system records. We thank you for joining us today for our project demonstration. Are there any questions?
I got one. I actually got 2.
Oh,
So this is Drew,
Hi, Drew.
software engineering manager with Northwestern Mutual. The first question I have is why you're linking out to a BMI calculator and not just calculating it.
So the reason we're doing that is because there are multiple ways to get that BMI. So calculated based on the height and weight, like through that link, is the most standard one, but not always the most accurate. So we were requested to have multiple BMI routes. So this calipers would be a different way of taking that body mass index for the patient.
So I see weight and you also have them enter height. So if BMI is calculated, couldn't you just calculate that for them unless they change it to calipers or arm?
I suppose that could be an extension that we could add.
Just to, I mean, if I'm thinking about it from a nursing standpoint, the last thing I want to do is have another tab open up and calculate something to try to copy and paste it back in. So that was my first question. The other question is, it's awesome that you can configure new stuff through the administration. That's phenomenal, especially based on where I know this project originated. How do you validate that the admin doesn't screw it up? Or that the page that gets built doesn't have the right mappings or doesn't have questions on it that should be there and become an invalid configuration?
We don't currently have any way to validate that, whether or not it works together or doesn't work together. I don't see how we could actually do that, because if what I'm understanding is correctly, if they accidentally added the joint question to the HEANT, would there be any validation with that? No, but they could go back and edit it.
Can I add the joint tab without adding any questions to it?
Yes.
Yes, theoretically
And
you could.
So that's the sort of, like, how do you validate from a systemic standpoint that you can't, because Mary, you're absolutely right. You can't validate that the question they're adding to a screen is valid. But is it valid to have a screen with nothing on it? Those sorts of things to help prevent the user from being their own worst enemy. So just a thought for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Julie from nursing. I've been a faculty consultant, and Drew knows how many years I've been working on this project. How do you prevent it from, let me backtrack. Students will be beta testing this in the fall in our simulation lab, and previous difficulties we've had is as soon as the students enter the data, the system crashes. And then we can't beta test it anymore because the students use it as part of their capstone project. So how do we prevent entry causing a system crash?
We did a thorough testing of the whole system midpoint, and we looked for places that crashing might occur. Usually it happens when you try to delete something that isn't, that's linked up to something else. Or the key isn't found, and so we took pains to correct any of those situations, or to deal with them in advance to make sure that the thing was available to be deleted.
Thank
We
you.
also, oh, go ahead, Julie, sorry.
Go ahead, I'm done.
This is Erin Thompson, one of the nursing faculty also. So one of the questions that I have is, when we use these for our students, if we're gonna be beta testing, if we go ahead and say I have a group that comes in at 8 o'clock, and then we go ahead and they enter that data, and I have a group that comes in now at 10 o'clock, and I want them to pick up from the patient, from the same patient that the 8 o'clock group did, are we able to go ahead and do that, or do we have to go ahead and create another encounter?
So if they have an account and any of these patients can be accessed by the nurse, by the students when they're available. So these can be updated before, when we showed, say, if the first group created the patient care assessment and the second group would then update it, they could go back and go to that specific patient care assessment in that patient and modify the data. Once again, they cannot do anything with the pain assessment in the update, but they can edit anything else.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the first assessment that they go ahead and do is going to be that first encounter. Now, if I come back an hour later to do another reassessment for my patient, I can only edit the first assessment, or can I create another assessment itself?
You can create multiple assessments for each encounter. So yes, you can create multiple assessments for any encounter. You can also create more encounters.
Perfect. Thank you so much, you guys. Great
Yes.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Angela. I just wanted to add a couple little logistical things onto this to help the team out. This is just our first pass at this. Well, technically it's our second pass at it. And I wanted to reconfirm what they had mentioned about the testing. They did some amazing testing, and we have not seen the system crash once in this whole term that they've been working on it. So that's one thing that I wanted to share. The other thing that I wanted to share is that in terms of creating patients and things like that, right now that is a manual process. So when nursing takes over beta testing this and starting to use it, there is going to be some manual labor in getting those encounters started up for them, which is something that I would help them with those first few semesters. Ideally, we want to someday have it set up at security levels where we can have these patients already in the system and recycling them and things like that. But in the meantime, right now, we would do exactly what they mentioned, which is you'll have the encounter available. All they have to do is select the encounter from the list of active encounters, and then they can add as many PCAs as they want to that patient or edit the ones that exist. So they've done a really fantastic job. And I wanted to mention that one of the biggest advancements they made was that editing screen. That's not something that would be widely open to everybody. It would be for the administrator like myself to help maintain. And we wanted to do that because we thought if there are tweaks or changes to normals and what you have to assess, we didn't want to have to go through programmers to get it. We wanted it to be something that would be self-administered by our program. So if the nursing staff said, oh, these within normal limits have changed or they're not right, I can go in and make those changes very quickly and easily to support the program. So those were some of the things that they really worked very hard on. And I did see one other question about the scale of 1 to 10. That did go away, but that doesn't mean we can't bring it back in the future if we find that we need that. I kind of went through and I researched all of the scales I could come up with and said, can we do these different scales? And that's what they put in. So we can always look at adding something else with that as well.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
We have time for one last question if anyone has one.
Is there a way to improve the experience on pain assessment? Since Nikki gave me one more question. If you go to the pain assessment tab, whoever's driving, and like you show me the pain assessment, like I think I saw a number. So like when you select 2, is there a reason I can't select the face?
Right now, this is just a plain image. We would have to do image mapping and then link that up to the form as well.
Right. So, and you're not wrong. And I know that, so this would probably be something that, you know, getting it working is step 1 and making it work pretty. But moving your radio buttons to be each individual face and then being able to show the selected one. The thing that also gets is then when I'm on the reviewing of this, so if you select a pain level and then save it and go back to where we had the view, however you do that, then instead of showing the number and the value of hurts a whole lot, you could actually just highlight the face. So from a visual cue standpoint, I'm looking at the faces going, which one is it? Because it's a really big image in the middle of your screen. And really what I'm looking for is the light text on black background, and it's not as clear immediately. The other question I have based on seeing that text and talking about it is, have you checked for ADA compliance with contrast and sort of how this fares for like colorblind and other visual impairments?
So on the question of accessibility and compliance with those kind of standards, we did our best to keep all of that in mind, but with all the other work that we had to do, it was pretty overwhelming to try to redo the entire style of the website. I believe that's planned for a future iteration of this project.
Yes.
Makes sense. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, team. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Our next group will be another health IT group. And I'm going to turn it over to the amazing duo.
All right, I'm ready to take over control if that's all right, Nikki.
The dynamic duo.
The dream team. Okay. Is it coming through okay?
Yep.
All right, sweet. So we are the Health Information Technology Requirement Gathering Group. We ran alongside the PCA group this semester for HIT.
So first off, we're going to talk about our team. My name is Daniel Carl. I'm currently a software intern at Milwaukee Jobs. I'm working on the product sustaining team. I've worked there roughly a year. Some previous work experience I have, I was an intern at Northwestern Mutual, where I was able to take part in a bunch of coding boot camps, and I was also able to test some software with Jasmine and Jest. I intend to transfer to UW-Milwaukee this fall for information science technology. I'm really excited about that, and I'm also an avid chess player.
My name is Mike, or Michael. I'm a software intern at BRP down in Sturtevant, Wisconsin. I primarily deal in control software engineering for manufacturing. Planning to transfer to the same program as Dan in the fall, and I have previous experience in mechanical engineering. Angela Lee was our client and advisor for this project. She's a WCTC HIT program instructor and project coordinator. So first we'll be going over some contents for this presentation. We'll start off with a project introduction, go over some background information on the system, go over our methodology for how we conducted ourselves, do a documentation showcase, and wrap up with a conclusion. So some project background on the HIT system. So the HIT software here at WCTC simulates real-world hospital and clinic software. So this allows the students to practice working with the type of software they would encounter in the workplace after they graduate from the program. So as the previous group mentioned, this includes things like patient records, patient visits or encounters as they're called within the system, and patient care assessments. So all of these work together to simulate that real-world software for them. So we'll be going over how our group impacted this software and kind of what we did this semester. And we had a focus on documentation and planning.
So as the previous slide mentioned, we actually didn't have to touch any code for this project. We took on the project manager role and the more of a business analyst role to gather documentation for future projects to code out the HIT system.
So because our project's a little different, we came up with an analogy to help describe it and get the point across. So it goes, if you want to build a road from coast to coast, before you start laying any pavement, you should know which direction to go, if there are any mountains or rivers, and finally, if anyone's actually going to use the road. So in this example, laying the pavement is analogous to doing the code and the implementation, and knowing which direction, any obstacles, and who's going to use it is analogous to creating a project skeleton or a framework and kind of planning out what you're going to be doing before you dive into implementing it. So in the past, groups have had poor documentation within the IT Capstone projects. So this led to difficulty in meeting requirements and keeping the projects on track. Also, loss of information. So particularly for the IT program here, the Capstone groups change semester to semester. So where one group leaves off, another group is picking up, and that isn't always documented exactly what they accomplished and where it was left. So it can be difficult to find the code and kind of a guideline or what was worked on and accomplished. Again, in the workplace, this leads to things like information overlap. So the same work might be completed twice if it was undocumented or the code got lost somewhere. So you might have that incoming project Capstone group basically redevelop the same thing if they weren't aware of where it was within the system. And then when you're actually working on a project and kind of in full force work mode, poor documentation leads to decreased coordination. So it can be difficult to align team members if you don't have kind of a central information repository to work around as a team. So some of our project goals for this project. So because we're not coding this semester, we're primarily gathering requirements and road mapping where the HIT software will be, 2-3 semesters from now, and what's actually going to be developed into. So we did do database schema design to accommodate future groups so that there's some backend there. So when they actually develop code that interacts with the data that's being stored, they don't have to also be coming up with that schema and how to lay it out and structure it in the same semester that they're developing. And kind of this also goes in line with the next point of kickstarting the next HIT groups. So these IT program Capstone students, as they come in, they'll have a backlog of information to work with. And they're not starting from scratch trying to gather requirements before they can even get to developing their project. This speeds up development time immensely. Then also this is creating an information hub, so a central hub for project reference documents. And this encourages alignment and working around the same information as the project progresses semester to semester. Next, we'll be going over background information on the system that we gathered. So we're breaking down these new software additions into groups of features. And the idea is that one set of features can be implemented at a time and then move on to the next, similar to how currently the PCA group is working on the PCA features. These next equivalent medical systems, similar to the PCA, would be electronic medication administration records, or EMARs, physician orders, or POs, and medical coding and billing.
So the first system we're going to talk about is the physician order system. So the physician order system keeps track of everything authorized for a patient. May it be the medicines that they need or are using, whether they're released from the facility or they're being entered to it, or whether they have lab tests going on or not. Particularly, we have a focus on the medical approval process as it relates directly to the EMAR. Some use cases or user statements for the physician order system are: as a physician, I want to view current patient information so that I can decide what medicine works best for the patient. And as a physician, I want to view the entire list of medicines on file. The reason why these two areas are really important for the system is that you want to be able to know what medicines are available or on hand, and to be able to view the patient records to decide whether or not patients should be on a certain medicine or not.
So here's a visual representation of what an existing physician order system would look like. So typically the physician role will be selecting an order type. In this case, you can see it's a medication order. Then they're filling out additional information related to that order type. So for medication, that would be things like the dosage, the route of administration, the schedule to deliver it upon, and any comments about that scheduled physician order.
So the next system that we're working on is the electronic medication administration record, also known as the EMAR. What the EMAR is, it's essentially a legal record for all drugs administered to a patient at a healthcare facility. That's everything from drug information, patient info, the date drugs were administered to them, the people that administer them, and also notes. The reason why this is important is these records are legally binding, so it can prove that patients are receiving the required care needed throughout the facility, or to prove that they aren't receiving the care needed. The user statement for this is: as a nursing student, I want to update the EMAR when I deliver/administer medicine so that everything is legally documented for the future.
So again, we've got a visual representation. And in case it's not clear, this is kind of a visual idea of what these future groups would be developing. And we'll get to the documentation on them. But so this pulls in essentially the same information that a medication order from a physician role would be submitting. So you have that same medication, the schedule for it, the dosage, how it's being administered, and when.
So the next system that we focus on is the medical coding system. This is essentially keeping track of all the billable items or medicines used during the time a patient is at a facility. As we all know, healthcare facilities, they're businesses, they need to have a form of income, so you need to keep track of that income.
So now we'll be going over our project methodology, and kind of this ties in line with why we didn't code and why we were primarily focused on gathering information and documenting that for future groups. So as we were looking at and getting information from our client, Angela, about the EMAR, the PO, and medical coding as the next major systems to be developed, we noticed that they follow a trend in terms of the documentation that we were creating. So typically there was an overview and a guide on what that system actually is and what it entails, kind of what we've just demonstrated to you. The requirements, functional and non-functional, who the users would be and how they're interacting with that system, and any data components that need to be documented as well. So for organizing our documentation system, we came up with this idea of the feature set. So all of the feature set documentation follows a consistent template, and this makes it very legible for groups to read and get that information that they need to start developing with. So for example, EMAR would be a feature set, physician order would be a feature set, so would medical coding. And so within this feature set documentation scheme, we have an overview document, and this is kind of like a guide. It contains information, background information, user information, again, these kind of high level points about what the data is going to be, how the system should act, who are the users, and where it connects to that, where it connects to this current system. Underneath that, we have user interface mockups, process flowcharts, and use case diagrams. These provide a very visual way to interact with the information that's documented within the overview document. Then we also have database documentation. So these are things like entity relationship diagrams and SQL scripts. The ERD in particular can act as a good map for any groups that are writing code that interacts with the database so that they're not lost trying to find, which information is in which table and how can I access it to write code that interacts with it. And then we also have something called the Scrum checklist. And this is kind of our starter product backlog. And this is a set of recommended tasks that can be done by any incoming group so that they can hit the ground running. So we're going to pop out of the presentation real quick to go over some of our actual documentation. And we're not going to dive too deep for the sake of time, but we do want to show basically what that incoming student or team as a Capstone group would be receiving. So we have project overview documents. These kind of detail a lot of the same information that we're explaining in this presentation, how to work within this feature set documentation scheme, and then the feature sets themselves. So for example, here we see the EMAR. Within that, we have the overview document. And this has the background information for EMAR, feature set goal, the connection point, any data requirements, functional requirements, user stories, things like that. We have the Scrum checklist, and we'll get more into detail on these soon. Then we also have the flowcharts and use case diagrams that provide that visual representation of how the system's operating. And we've done these for the EMAR, as I just showed, the physician orders, and then medical coding is slightly special, so it's a little bit shorter. We also have these quick start guides that go over not quite feature set level documentation, but allow basically any small components of the system that would need to be developed. They give you a head start working in that as well, in terms of specifically how it relates to the existing HIT software. So now if we dive back into the presentation, we'll go over each of these in more detail.
Yep. So one of the more important things that we did for documentation is we use entity relationship diagrams, also known as ERD. So what they are is they're essentially flowcharts for how entities relate to each other. We use these in particular for our SQL database tables. And what they do is it makes the database connections much easier to follow, as it's much more visually appealing to the user. We also built our ERD systems off of the current database schema using Lucidchart. And if you look on the right side of the screen, the highlighted portion is all of the changes that we had to make for our feature sets. So we made a pretty big dent into the database for sure. On top of this, we also created a script to recreate the database changes that we made, just in case there's catastrophic failure, because as we know, it's students working on this and sometimes the worst happens. So we want to try to help mitigate that for the future. So another piece of important documentation that we used are use case diagrams. What they are is they're ways to demonstrate how a user or role can interact or operate with a system. It's supposed to be high level and visually appealing. As you can see with the picture on the right, it shows a given user like physician and what they can do in the system. So it helps determine roles and permissions and also define system requirements. So you know what physicians need to be able to access. So you know what systems that need to be built out for that. Another important thing we used for documentation is flowcharts. As we know, medical systems can get very, very complicated. So you wanted to help ease the struggle of figuring that out for the software developers. So this is just an easier way to have them have an idea of where they should go with the code from the start. And one of the last things that we included is Scrum checklists. It's supposed to be hand-in-hand overview with the documentation. It provides a lot of items that they can use for their product backlogs. Just so if they don't know what they need to add for the next sprint, there's a few ideas for that. And also has a collection of steps that we would take from start to finish on how to create the system, just so they can have a different perspective on what they should do or what they should start with.
So revisiting the earlier example for an EMAR user interface, another type of document we included for each feature set was a UI mockup. So here we've got an example of the kind of older traditional style that they're trying to recreate or simulate with the software in a future feature set. So moving forward, if we look at kind of a UI mockup that we created that would more closely mimic the technologies used by a current Capstone group, this provides a good starting point for future groups on what that user interface should look like.
Next thing we included were some quick start guides that Michael previously mentioned. These are things that are not required currently for the system, but would be very useful for later on. The first of which would be the QR code reader. That's because a lot of times to access patient information, they can just scan a QR code to pull that up for each patient versus having to enter in their name or type in the numbers for that. So the user statement for this is, as a nurse, I want to scan a QR code to retrieve patient information. And this can also be applied to other things like medicine, because a lot of medicines have QR code information on them. Another useful tool that they'll probably need to use would be the identity framework. Essentially, it's a tool designed to control and manage user roles, permissions, viewable content, et cetera, throughout the application. This can help separate whether or not a entry-level nurse can view some content versus what a senior-level nurse can view. So it helps a lot with security, which is pretty big in the healthcare industry. So to conclude, essentially what our goal for the semester was to create a lot of documentation information and pull it together into a repository for future groups to be able to access and pull from. We also wanted to make sure the next HIT Capstone groups won't start blind. I know the other HIT group had a lot of difficulties trying to figure out where the other group left off, where the documentation was, and we kind of want to just try to, in the future, make this a lot easier. We also want to make sure the information persists better across semesters. So if the next group only finishes 2 feature sets, the semester after that will still have the information to complete the next. And if you enjoyed this presentation, feel free to connect with us. We're really happy and friendly. Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question. This is Julie Summer, faculty with the nursing program. Will future nursing students be able to scan the QR code on the simulation armband, and then that will that populate into the EMR?
Right, so this is included in our documentation in more detail, but basically what we gathered from Angela is that the ideal scenario would be scanning the patient barcode that's created for them, and then scanning the medication that's to be administered would have a barcode as well, or a QR code in this case. And then together that would link them to fill out or automatically fill out that spot in the EMR interface.
Thank you.
As software students, how did it feel for your software capstone to be not writing software?
I'll be honest, it felt very weird initially for that. The first few sprints especially felt the most odd out of all of them, because all we were doing was just gathering information from Angela and trying to push for more content and stuff like that. So eventually we hit a point where we kind of got into like the software developing mentality, where we're trying to think for the future for the project of what information we need, what are we missing, and stuff like that.
In your documentation, did you document how to add to your documentation so that so there's consistency when this happens again for future feature sets?
So there's one of the overview documents is what is a feature set, and it outlines basically how we created and our methodology for basically creating each section, be it the EMR or the PO, and what all the components of a feature set are. So while it isn't truly a how to make a feature set document, it does provide like all of the key points on what information should be documented to stay consistent with our documentation.
This is Angela. I just wanted to kind of chime in and talk a little bit about the project from my side of things. It was very interesting because this is a different approach than we've taken in the past when we've built these systems. I think this is really going to help us a lot going forward, particularly because when we started looking at things like the EMAR and the physician orders, it is both of those are very, very complicated systems. And we kept finding that before you can do one thing, you need something else. So getting this documentation lined up, I think, is really going to help in the future. They did a really nice job with standardizing that documentation so that it is consistent across all of the feature sets. And then we've also talked about processes for bringing that information forward. So there's a repository where they will be saved, and then we've talked about possible ways of bringing teams together on an ongoing basis going forward, where we access that documentation and then move forward, always having that rotation of creating feature sets and then going into the programming process. So it was really nice to be able to have that vision and know where we're kind of headed, rather than constantly swimming around the same application over and over, which we've done the last several semesters. Each semester's been great, but every semester we feel like we're starting over. And I'm sort of the only constant, so this will be a really nice advantage to the groups going forward, I think.
So I'll ask a question that we've heard mentioned before in regards to your project. How does this still play into Scrum? Isn't this more like waterfall where we're gathering all the requirements up front?
So at least in a sense, we are kind of, even though it feels bad to admit it, following kind of a waterfall methodology, in that we are doing a lot of requirement gathering up front, and then there's development coming after. But I think what's unique is that those systems, waterfall and Scrum and Agile, are built from an aspect of creating code in a workplace environment, right, for a company and a set of developers. These projects are being created by one semester's team at a time. And so that greatly changes and affects that environment. So because so much information is lost semester to semester, I think it's good to gather at least some substantial information up front, which is what we've done now, so that when future groups are working within a true Scrum development environment, because again, we didn't do any developing, we were gathering information, they're able to have that spot to go back to and keep referencing that information. And it's not like they won't be meeting with Angelo or a client and operating on Scrum during their semester. They're still free to do that. And our parts of our documentation are kind of purposefully vague in a way so that it's open to interpretation and modification as those requirements change when a group actually goes to implement it. Because one thing that we document, another group might look at and go, I can't code that. We have to change this, right? So.
Are there any additional questions for this group from anyone? All right, then thank you very much, guys. And we will move on to our next group, which is our culinary team chef Andy group. After the next presentation, we will take a short intermission.
All right, everyone can see the screen.
All right, if we're ready to go, then I'm ready to start. So hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We are Team Chef Andy, and today we will be presenting our web application called Picnic. Picnic is an assessment tool we've been developing this semester for the culinary department at WCTC. We're going to start off by going over introductions. First off, our stakeholder is Chef Andy, who is a professor in the culinary department and also a restaurant owner in the greater Milwaukee area. Next, our product owner is Matt Green, one of the instructors in the IT department, who met with us each week to observe our progress and guide the development. For myself, my name is Ryan Sanders. I'm a member of the development team. I chose to join this project because of its focus on design. As a student pursuing both degrees in development and design, I felt I made a good fit for this team.
Hello, my name is Abby Snowpack. I was the Scrum Master of this project. I have an internship at Northwestern Mutual this summer as a software engineer. The reason why I was chosen for this project is because of my day job. I am a middle school teacher. I bring the perspective of an educator to this project and was able to keep that perspective throughout the design of this project.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm finishing my last semester toward my associate degree with database specialty. I plan on looking for a full-time job and internship starting in September. And the reason why I wanted to work on this project is that I wanted to design and create database from scratch.
Hello, I'm Eric Liu, and I'm planning on graduating in the fall. I've had one internship at Batteries Plus, and I'm currently looking for future opportunities. What interested me about this project is that it's new, so everything had to be built from scratch. Also, being someone that has worked in food service, being able to build something that could benefit culinary students as well as the school was a motivating factor.
And my name is Sierra. I was one of the developers on this project. This is my last semester here at WCTC, and I recently got a full-time position with Northwestern Mutual as a software engineer. I joined this project since I mostly work on existing systems for work, so I wanted to have the new experience of building an application like this from scratch.
So what is Picnic? Picnic is a web application that we developed for the culinary department at WCTC. It's a tool that allows students to create assessments based on their cooking skills, which can be graded by the instructor for feedback. The problem that we are looking to solve is the current system that they're using is called Sesame, and they're ending their service at the end of June. So we did our best to create a solution that can be used for the future. Our goal was to keep the application simple and easy to use, so culinary students and instructors are able to access it quickly.
We started our work on the project with meeting with Chef Andy to gather the project requirements. Chef Andy told us about how he is currently using 2 paper forms to record the students' assessment information. Both forms are showed on our slide. One on the left is a form for technique assessment, where listed various cooking techniques product student made, the dates as well as scores and criteria. And on the right is a form for equipment assessment that identifies a list of equipment that the student needed to be familiar with. Chef Andy wants to keep data for the student's identification of the equipment, and for extra credit, the date of the skill assessment. That is practically what we had in the beginning where we started. Chef Andy also showed us Sesame, the application he's currently using. He was not completely satisfied with that due to its complexity and its limited reporting capabilities. Chef Andy wanted us to create an application that would allow instructors and students of the culinary department to easily and fast enter technique and equipment assessment. The solution had to be simple and easy to use. To take some pressure off of Chef Andy, students will handle their own login. And then from there enter the needed information such as name of the product made, technique used, dates, notes, scores, and upload images as well. Chef Andy can then access the data on a later time if he wants to enter a further evaluation and grade and give feedback. The supporting So he also wanted to students who already graduated to have access to the application as well. The support and database needed to be designed and created to handle the data Chef Andy wanted to accumulate. I understand that thinking about databases might not be the most exciting part of our presentation, but it's a very important part. The first step was to create a database schema that could store all the relevant information. As a team's database specialist, I began to process by designing a database model from scratch with just these 2 paper forms to guide me. The database structure had to be able to adjust for future changes. For example, if there will be more classes or different assignments. And the next step was to create the actual database. The school will provide NSQL servers for this purpose. I am proud of the way the database turned out, and the rest of the team had worked very hard to make this into a beautiful web application. Now I would like to handle things over to Ryan, who will start our demo.
All right, so this is Picnic. This is what Chef Andy and his students will see when they pull it up on their devices. As mentioned before, I'm currently enrolled in both software and design programs, so I have previous experience with planning layout. When first creating Picnic, Chef had mentioned how he was comfortable with programs like Canvas, so I wanted Picnic to feel familiar to him and his students by using similar color schemes. Coming up with the name Picnic was something that I just felt rolled off the tongue. It just comes natural and sounds like something Chef Andy and his students can easily remember. The basis of the program is that students will simply take photographs of the food that they've prepared in class for Chef Andy to assess. Now here's Abby with the demonstration of how the site works.
Okay. So when a student or a user gets the link, they would go to register. Like Anna said previously, we are trying to take as much pressure off of Chef with the creation. As an educator, I really appreciate it, not having to sit and put in spreadsheets of student information. So the users would click register. When they register, all of these forms would be blank. It's auto-filling for me. But all these would be blank. They would go through and enter their school email, their ID, their first name, last name, their password of their choice, and confirm. Because Chef told us that majority of the users would be students, the role that it is automatically assigned is student to our new users. If we are to log in as the administrator, that's one of our 3 roles that we have on this website. You can see that it comes to this very simple table. All 3 of these pages are identical. The only difference is the user role is at the top. So this is the instructor page. You can see the 2 users that have instructor rights. We can remove them from this role, or we can add other non-instructors to this role. All 3 pages are exactly the same. So moving on to students. As we are here, you can see that when a student first logs in, they can see their name. So we are on Jane's account. Jane has her 2 different two different assessments open. These do open and close for us here. Like Anna previously said, the 2 assessments are very different, and what they need for these assessments are different. So if we begin the sous vide assessment, here I am in the kitchen, I have to record the product name. So I'm going to be making some prime ribs. Chef wanted a space for them to write a description. He wants them to be able to write multiple sentences for this demonstration. I will just be writing one. I sous vide some prime rib. All right, and once we do that, the students have to self-score themselves. So after they are done making whatever they're making, so the sous vide ribs in this case, they would score themselves. This rubric is based off of what we put into the database. So if something needs to be changed in the future, it would be changed in the database and it would automatically update in the code. So I'm going to give myself a 6 out of 7. And then we can also upload an image. So here is my wonderful prime rib that I made, and then I would submit the assessment. You can see once I do that, sous vide is no longer under technique. You can notice that there are 3 tabs up at the top. Sous vide has moved to the submitted tab. You can also see that Jane has another technique here, baking. If I click to view, it opens up a modal and you can see all of the information that I just put in. So the picture of my ribs that I made, the description I wrote, I have the date and time of when it was submitted, the technique, the self-score, and the instructor score. You can see here that it says not available. This is kind of like the waiting station, so the student can see what they submitted, but it has not been graded yet. If I go back here to equipment, the equipment assessments are very different than the technique. There's no grading involved with the equipment assessments. It's just recording updates and what they did. You can also see by the buttons, we have 2 different ones right now. We have one that says finish and one that says begin. If I click on a begin, you can see that it's completely blank. Students have to record a description. They have to record the date that they were able to successfully identify the piece of equipment in the kitchen. And then they have to record the date that they were able to use this piece of equipment in the kitchen. If I were to close out and go to pasta cooker, which says finished, that's because Jane started this assessment. Okay, she started it today, and she wrote in some ravioli. And this is the date that she put in for the identify. For the skill, I'm going to say that it's tomorrow, so I did it tomorrow, and then I'm able to submit that assessment. Once I do that, you can see that it's no longer here. If I go to submitted, you do not actually see equipment here because equipment's not graded and it doesn't need to be seen for this. It doesn't have to be seen for a grade. We didn't put it on this page. We moved it right to the completed tab. This is the page that has items that are graded. So if we click on the view for custard, you can see the picture, the description, and we have the submitted time for when Jane submitted it, and then we have the time for when Chef graded it. So we click close. And for equipment, you can see that here are the dates and the times and the descriptions that the student put in that they could use the deep fryer, but they can't edit it. If we were to log out and to log back in as the instructor, when the instructor first logs in, you see the student directory of the students that are in the class. To see an individual student, they would have to go to view grades. Once they are in here, let's give it a second, we have 3 different tables that you can look at. The first table is the submitted technique assessment. So you remember that these are the assessments that Jane have submitted, but Chef is not yet graded. Then we have the completed technique assessments. So these are the ones that Chef has graded. And then we have the equipment assessments. So these are the assessments that the students are recording the date. If the student were to have one of these filled in, but not the other, the one that's not filled in would say NA. So Chef would know they did one, but not the other. These headers that you see are all dictated to us by Chef. He wanted to see the technique, the product, the notes, when it was submitted, the image that the student took a picture of, and the student self-score. Right here, we have a simple drop down for Chef, so they can go through, he can submit the assessment, and then you can see the score right here. Here we have the instructor score, and this automatically goes to the student as well. So Chef doesn't have to press any extra buttons to get that score to go to the student. It just automatically populates on the student's completed page. So that ends our demo. I'm going to hand this back off to Sierra.
So to ensure our app provides business value to the school, we implemented a simple design to cut back on the unneeded features. Our app also saves the school money by being an in-campus program built by students. Graduates of the culinary program are still able to access their assessments past their graduation as well, simplifying the process for them in order to demonstrate their skills and learning progression to employers. Our app stays true to statewide culinary classroom guidelines and is adaptable to any future needs. And for the future capabilities of our app, we outlined a few main directives we hope to pass on to the next group that picks up this project. That would include the functionality for instructors to manage their courses, allowing Chef to view multiple classes at once and toggle between semesters. Accessibility features for students with disabilities could be furthered as well, with priority on the visually impaired and those using screen readers.
Some of the other features that can be implemented in the future are the Chef of the Day role. In the future, there is a secondary grading system that Chef uses for students, where a student is selected as Chef of the Day and are able to grade the other students as said. As for mobile compatibility, the current version is still functional on mobile devices, but could be optimized better and even further with new views and optimized resolutions for certain devices.
Overall, we really enjoyed working on this project together. It was an interesting experience for us to start with 2 rubrics and translate it into a functional application. We look forward to the future when Picnic can be used by the culinary department at WCTC. Thank you.
Any questions?
Abby.
Yeah.
Why was the time 5 hours off?
I don't.
So that issue, I actually realized it's in UTC time, and we actually fixed that, but I didn't republish it. But we have like the fixed changes locally.
This is Mark McCarthy. I have a quick question. Is there any way for the instructor to edit the grade that was provided after it had been submitted?
Currently, no. But that is a great idea to add to our backlog.
We have a question from Katie Roberts. Katie, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I'm Katie Roberts. I'm the State Education Director providing oversight for the culinary program, and I'm really happy that I was able to join you today. These presentations have been fantastic. I know that Chef Andy really has liked the Sesame program, and I'm glad to see that you guys are able to develop something to help them out. One of the things that I was thinking of while you were presenting is if students who have graduated who are able to still use the site was there a plan to identify them as alums at some point so that there is a tracking, so to speak, of the alumni and maybe a chance for them to update their information to show where they are and what they're doing?
That's something that Chef had asked of us at the beginning of this project, and we unfortunately weren't able to get to it, but that has the plan. It is in our backlog in our backlog for this. We want students to be able to go in and to be able to show off what they made while they were at WCTC. So it is one of the future goals of our project.
Awesome. You guys did a really great job. Thanks.
Thank you.
With the ability to reuse accounts, is there any concern that, like, does WCTC recycle accounts at any point in time where if I'm no longer a student 5 years from now, can someone get my account name?
From my understanding of students who have graduated from WCTC, they still have access to their school emails and they're still using them. So that would have to be a conversation when they actually launched Picnic for the culinary department, because that's something that Chef really wants them to be able to do, to be able to make it like a food resume of what they have cooked in the past.
But there would be no duplicate accounts, because if a student tries to sign up with a different email of someone who's already registered, it would let them know that.
Right, so you're not going to allow accounts. So the question was, if WCTC reuses the accounts, do you end up having a student in culinary who can't log in because a prior student had? Then the other question, because this is obviously a public-facing web portal for use for the students across the internet at large, what do you all do to verify security and prevent SQL injection and other various forms of cybersecurity attacks?
I don't think we have an answer for that.
We used Identity Framework for the user authentication, and there were other features that we were looking to implement in the future, such as having users verified through their email, and that's how we looked to solve that, I think.
It was a conversation that we had at a previous presentation, because Chef really wants to get this rolling in the culinary department, but there are a lot of steps that it would have to go through WCTC to protect students from hacking and having other people jump onto the website. So those are a lot of further steps that we need to address.
One thing with that is also the possibility of two-factor authentication, because if they're signing up with their email, there could be a link sent to their email where they would have to verify that they are who they say they are in order to verify for that. But that's, once again, also on the backlog. Not so much in the scope yet.
Dr. B had a question.
Well, not too many. First, it's a nice package. It's much cleaner than Sesame. Seems to be a lot smoother. I would assume from the layout of the unit, it should be easy for us to modify it as we pick up new equipment, divest of obsolete equipment and so forth. Is that something we can do, or do we submit that to the IT department? I guess the question is, how do we maintain and upgrade the system to meet the needs of our students and the American Culinary Federation? And next, please do not sous vide prime rib.
What?
He's the chef in our group, so that's on him. I don't.
It was good. It was good. Yes, we're in the future. It wouldn't be hard to add capabilities for instructors to have a menu to add more equipment or technique types. So down the line, it wouldn't be too difficult to implement.
And that could be implemented ideally in both the admin and instructor roles, because either one would be able to go in and edit that equipment and assessments.
Okay, I guess my question is it possible for us to go in and insert lines, or is that something that has to be handled through coding?
Currently through coding as of right now.
All right, very good. Nice job. It's a nice piece of software.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for the group? All right, thank you, Team Chef Andy. At this point, we're going to take an intermission and we will reconvene at about 7:40. So next group, be ready to go at 7:40, and I will put that up on the screen.
Carter, which island are you on?
I'm in Hawaii right now.
You just gotta rub it in, man. That's just not nice.
Yeah, I'm really fortunate to be on this beautiful beachfront. The lighting just doesn't hit my face right, though.
To be honest, I'm kind of surprised that the wind that's making the waves behind you isn't a little bit more on your mic. You got a good audio canceling. That's nice.
Yeah, you know it. And I put so much gel in my hair that it's not moving either.
And you're enjoying it with a shirt and tie on too, huh?
Yeah, long sleeves and all, you know.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's a little backwards, but we're making it work, you know.
Well, we'll get started shortly. So if the SLE group, the scheduling group, wants to get everything ready to go, you can.
Sure, sounds good. Just give me a second.
Sure, and then we'll just give people a minute or two to come back still. But all right, team, you can go whenever you're ready.
All right, sounds good. Let's jump right in. I thought I heard an echo for a second. Okay. All right, so our project for the semester was the SLE mapping and scheduling. My name is Derek. I'm currently a software applications developer intern with Superior Support Resources with a full-time position awaiting post-graduation. And my role in this project dealt with development on both the front and back end.
My name is Lucas. I'm currently in the process of transferring to Carroll after I complete these courses. I am starting an internship in the fall at Superior Support Resources as well. My primary role was handling most of the back end work and making sure everything was running as efficiently as possible.
Hi, I'm Henry. I completed an IT internship at CPS Optical, and I'm currently looking for a position. I worked on this project both on the front end and on the back end.
Hi, I'm Carter. Currently, I'm a marketing intern at the Ingleside Hotel. And for my role in this project, I was mainly a front-end developer.
All right, so moving on, we've got a roadmap breaking down our presentation flow. So we'll begin with the context, purpose of the application itself. followed by the UI, UX, design thought process, then the demonstration, and finally we'll conclude with our thoughts on the experience overall. So the project background, context. So following the end of each semester, WCTC reports student body assessments to the Higher Learning Commission. The Higher Learning Commission is a prestigious accreditor. Now these reported assessments are composed of criteria and values that WCTC instills in students. These assessments are categorized as critical life skills and technical skills attainment. These assessments are essentially the SLE, or student learning evidence. They act as a metric, in other words. Overall, what it's saying is, this is what we say our students are going to learn, and here's the evidence that shows that they are indeed learning. Now, this application is a tool meant for the administrator, and its value is found in eliminating what would otherwise be a manual process. It's more efficient, it facilitates to instructor schedules, because we know, we can all understand variable workloads and time constraints means submissions can't always be submitted in a timely manner. I mean, life happens. This pandemic illustrates that very example. So there needs to be flexibility. This is an application of great value, which is actively being used by the school. However, it was missing this mentioned flexibility. So overall, our goal was to add this greater functionality to it. So our approach to refining the requirements began with extensive collaboration with our project manager, Nikki, to fully understand the expected functionality, as well as maintain a uniform experience for the users. These included the ability to automate assessment timeframes and the flexibility to also individually modify assessment submission timeframes. So the solution then resulted in a development of the mapping module and of the scheduling module, which together allow this to happen. So to help understand how these two modules behave and interact, we can think of a mapping as a blueprint. Mapping being a link of a course and an assessment, which once defined can be used by the scheduling module. Right. So on that note, I'll pass it over to Carter, who will break down the design process.
All right, thank you, Eric. So I'm going to briefly take you guys through some of the design considerations that we had to think through for the front end of our application. We took great care in this topic because it was very important to know exactly what we were going to be developing before we started to actually make it. So some of the design considerations that we had to work with. So since this was an existing application, we had a few tools already in place. So we were using Bootstrap 4, which is essentially a styling framework for the front end. We also had Font Awesome, which we would use for our icons. And we also had an entire application that we pretty much had to match. Our target audience, as Eric mentioned, is the WCTC administrators. These are experienced people who know exactly what they want to do on this application. So we didn't necessarily need to add on too much description, just making sure that they knew what they were going to do on the application. Some of their user desires, which we found out through requirement gathering, were to have a quick and intuitive workflow. So making sure that we can do our functions quick and do them as predictable as possible. Another desire was that we needed to have as few pages as possible to have that quick workflow. So from here, we'll jump into our project demonstration where we'll see all of this in action. All right, so here is the administration view. This is the admin dashboard. We developed the mapping and the scheduling modules on here. So we'll jump into the mapping modules first. So from here, you're going to see that we have a simple laundry list of our mappings here. So we designed this list, here it is, based on how the data was structured. So we had the assessments, which is that big dark header there. And then underneath that, we had the rubrics associated with those assessments, and then the courses associated with the rubrics underneath that. We utilized accordion menus in this case as to not clutter the view, and so that the administrator would be able to drill down and see exactly what they wanted to see and not just be bombarded with a ton of different information. Another sort of design element that we added on was this clear hierarchy where we have the dark header, which leads down through indentation into the next one. So you'll see the top level element is at the very left, and then the next one is a step down, and then the next one is over more. This kind of makes it a very intuitive workflow for the user. Our next thing that we did was we added color accents on the page. Each of these colors match with the rest of the application. So the green typically means add course throughout the application. So we figured we would put the add course as green. And the red typically means delete. So we made that red as well. So one more other thing we did to add to an intuitive workflow was having these buttons make sense where they're placed. So if you're gonna delete accounting spreadsheets, you would go to the accounting spreadsheets delete button, and then you would be able to, that one is associated with that button. And you'll see the same design elements in the scheduling module as well. And so from here, I'll hand this off to Henry, and he can show you guys some of the mapping functionality.
Thanks, Carter. So let's add a course to the managerial accounting rubric. So let's first click the add course button. We see here that the program, in this case, the accounting program, is already pre-populated. So now we select the rubric, which is managerial accounting in this case, and then we go down to the course dropdown and select the course. Let's select accounting spreadsheets. There we go, and let's add that course. And then let's go under managerial accounting again. And we see here that accounting spreadsheets has indeed been added. So now let's delete that course. So as it's very clear, we just press the red X, and then there's a modal where we can choose to either delete or cancel it. So let's delete it. And then if we go back under managerial accounting, we see that it's no longer present. So now let's hand it over to Lucas.
So we've seen on this page how these mappings are created. And again, these are sort of the blueprints that'll be utilized for the scheduling page. So if we hop back out to the dashboard here, and then into the scheduling page, before we continue on with the functionality, one of our main concerns when we were developing this was efficiency and making sure that we weren't unnecessarily reloading pages and doing and hitting the database over and over again. So what we implemented on this page and all the others was a live search feature. So for each of these search boxes, it caches the data, and you can just type in what you're looking for, either by number or name, and it will filter down to what you're looking for without having to go and reload the page or requery the database. This dropdown is also filtered on this page to show only semesters that have schedules associated with them. And then if we jump into the configure semester page here, similarly, this dropdown only shows semesters that do not have schedules associated with them. The configure semester page is a form that the administrators would use to set up a new semester and apply all of the mappings that were previously created. You can set the submission start and end dates for the instructors to be able to submit their assessments based on the end of the course date or based on a hard universal date. Like so. We do already have most of the semesters that are in the database pre-populated, so we're just going to hop back and show you what that looks like. And for that, I will hand you back off to Eric.
All right, thanks. So we're back here, and we'll select now fall 2019. So like mentioned previously, this semester has courses that have sections with active assessments connected to them. And likewise, just like how we'd expect with semesters and courses, there are many of them. So what we've done here is we've also implemented a live search feature for courses, so we may search at our leisure. As you can see, there are plenty. So we've also gone ahead and implemented pagination here so that we may, keep the view clutter-free, essentially. So it's a nice, easy way to digest the page and the content. So now reinforcing what Carter mentioned about the UI design, when we click on a course belonging to this specified semester, we can see which sections belong to it. So if we click on this section, what we'll see next are the associated rubrics. In other words, these rubrics are linked to this section. Now, this is where the flexibility comes into play. We can see here the submission start date for this rubric and the end as well. So this acts as a convenient way for the user to come in and to adjust these times as needed. So we've implemented a calendar modal here that will conveniently change the date as needed. So we'll just choose some random dates here. And likewise, conforming to the style of the rest of the actual application, we have the green and we have the red and we have the icons as well. This one denoting the save feature. So if we return here, after clicking the save feature, we will see that our new time frame has been saved. And likewise, if we do want to remove one, we can do that as well. Standard deletion modal. So once that deletes, it is reflected and we can see. And last but not least, if we do want to add a rubric to a section, it's as simple as adding a new entry. So we'll click on add new entry. We'll specify which course. In this instance, we'll go with business finance. And select the section, in which case there's only one. And the rubric, let's go with anything. Global, cultural, yeah. We can specify the earliest submission date for this rubric and just specify a later one as well. Allow the entry. And upon refresh, we will see that the section does have a specified rubric.
Thanks for that, Eric. So now a brief summary. So what we developed for the mapping module, the specific features were a live search and an add and delete course feature. For the scheduling module, developed features include a search of generated semesters, which is filtered, a course search and pagination, the ability to modify submission timeframes, the ability to delete assessments, the ability to add entries, and the ability to generate dynamic semesters with static submission dates. And now for conclusion, so with any large group project comes the added challenge of coordinating such a group to effectively work on the project. With our and everyone else's meetings virtual due to the COVID-19 outbreak, we utilized tools such as Discord and Zoom to communicate with one another and share what we were working on. This allowed us to coordinate our work and make it as efficient as possible, giving us valuable experience in this regard for future projects. We also gained valuable experience with implementing Scrum in a real-world project. Working closely with our product owner, Nikki, allowed us to get feedback on what we were working on while we were working on it, and to make any necessary changes quickly. All this highlighted to us the value of using Scrum in practice to accomplish something productive, which was very satisfying for us. Additionally, we improved our knowledge of GitHub by using it in a group setting where we learned the ins and outs of this incredible useful hosting service. In conclusion, we greatly enjoyed the opportunity to complete the SLE mapping and scheduling functionality that will be put to use for many years by WCTC. Are there any questions?
Henry, this is Randy Cora. I work with the college team that facilitates our assessment on campus. I just want to compliment you on a great job. Wow, some great functionality you've added to the system. The question I have is, how are you pulling the course data into your database, and how are you maintaining that to keep it updated? Our course offerings are rather dynamic. We have course new offerings, we have courses that are canceled. So how are you keeping that data fresh?
So the data is pulled from the database directly each time you load the page. Adding and deleting courses wasn't part of the scope of this project. But if there are changes made or courses added or canceled or whatnot, by the other sections of this program, that'll be reflected in our modules, because it's not like statically getting the same data each time. It's updated each time you open that module.
So if I understand right, your team didn't really deal with the actual data transfer into the system. You really just worked on the interface for the mapping and the scheduling piece?
Right. So we didn't handle like removing or adding courses that WCTC offers. We handled setting up which courses are related to what assessments and when those submission timeframes are available. If a course is removed, then everything related to that course is also going to be removed. But that's all handled by different programs or different modules.
And then with regard to the scheduling piece, so you can set sort of a default semester window of assessments, that beginning date and the end date. And that's applied across the system then to all courses within the term. But it sounds like then you can go in and customize those assessment dates for each one if necessary.
Correct, yeah.
That's nice. That's a helpful feature because you know, this semester is a perfect example of where we had course dates change. And so we had to be really flexible and make some adjustments in the assessment schedule for the term. So the other question is with regard to the college moving to an 8-week term, is this system built around that new 8-week schedule that will be in place next year so that we could do this by 8-week term? So you would have your fall 1 term, set up your assessment schedule for that 8-week period, and then set up the next 8-week period?
Yeah, so essentially what would happen is when you go to generate the semester, like you saw, you can either set those hard dates or you can have it set by the end of the section. So regardless of whether or not it's an 8-week section or a 4-week or what have you, if you do it by the end of the course or the section offering date, then it'll automatically adjust to however long that is.
So you could set up the assessment based upon that end date of that 8-week term.
Correct, yeah.
So if all the courses end on October 15th, you could somehow apply that that assessment window to all of those courses?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, if I go into that admin mapping that you guys have created this semester, which looks pretty slick and sounds like does everything Randy needs it to do and then maybe more. If I try to delete something that's already had someone provide data through it, so if I go into like a previous semester or someone fills it out early and then we try to remove something, is that okay? Does that cause any issues? Is that like, how does the system handle deleting things after someone submitted data based on the current, like that initial setup?
So for the mappings, it's purely a mapping for semester creation going forward. So anything that happened in the past or that has data associated with it, that data is still going to be there. You're not removing, you know, the assessments that the instructors have submitted already. You're just basically removing, you know, the next semester you create, that mapping is no longer applicable to that next semester, but the previous entries are all maintained.
So if in a scenario of it gets set up and then partway through the semester, after one student has filled it out and they tell me, hey, why was this is a thing, can I remove it post a student submitting for that semester after it was already created? So if I've mapped something for the current semester that's ending tonight, and 2 of the students in this class have filled out Nikki's gone in and filled out 2 students and realizes, oh, something's wrong. We shouldn't have this in here. This isn't part of it. Can that be removed after data's been entered for that class? Does that make sense? Sort of the order that I'm talking about?
Yeah, so that would be essentially going in through the scheduling portion of it and removing that schedule from that course.
Okay, cool.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Hey, this is Kim Ehlert. I'm the business school dean, and this SLE project is something that we've been working on with Randy and Nikki for a couple of years. I appreciate the fact that you demoed the accounting program, because that happens to be my program as well. I think the application looks great. I guess, and maybe I missed this in the presentation, do the rubric to course assignments carry from semester to semester? Or do we have to go in every single semester and say, I want the capstone, accounting capstone rubric assigned to the accounting capstone course?
They're maintained. Generating a semester won't like reset those mappings or anything like that.
All right, because those don't change a ton. And once the state gets their hooks in them, that's pretty much it. You know, we review them, but they don't change a lot. And then the other question I have is, you demoed how to assign rubrics, like TSA rubrics. Is that same scheduling software utilized for the CLS rubrics, the critical life skills?
Yeah, it's applied the same way.
Okay, great. Nice job, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We would have time for one more question if anyone has one.
What was the biggest thing the group took away from working on this project?
Oh man. Well, it was. We might have different answers, but definitely for one, picking up a project that has been actively developed on is definitely a good experience. You don't always. And especially with my internship right now, what I'm seeing is that that's really what it's like. You jump in, and sometimes you don't have documentation. Sometimes you have no starting point. So, big challenge was really trying to gain our bearing and our footing. And I think our extensive collaboration with our project manager Nikki alleviated that so much. She, just refining on the requirements really helped to make sense of it all. So
I think for me, the biggest thing that I learned was how to take a fairly abstract, complicated concept and have it appear simple. When we were initially given the project and had it described to us, I don't think it really clicked with any of us. For the first couple sprints, we weren't quite sure exactly what we wanted our end product to look like. But once we finally understood and had our minds wrapped around it, and we were able to make it as simple as possible for the end user.
Thanks, guys. Nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. And last but not least, our other SLE team.
Give me 1 second here.
Sure.
Alrighty. So Randy kind of gave us a nice little leeway into ours. We actually did develop how to add courses and add them. So we are the Student Learning Evidence Courses Project Group. My name is Sam, and I worked as the Scrum Master on the project. I have about finished with college through WCTC this summer. I'm looking for either internship work in fall or maybe at the end of the summer also. And then I'm going to let the rest of the team introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Kayla Nguyen and I'm on the development team. I will be graduating at the end of this month, and I just finished my internship at the LaConte Product Group Incorporated.
Hi everyone, my name is Aikena Kevin, one of the developers for this project. I am hoping for an internship and graduation this summer. I requested to join this project because most of my school project was from scratch and I need an experience working on an existing project.
And then my name is Tyler Mastropolo. I am also hopefully starting my internship at the beginning of next fall as well. I really enjoyed this project because it's kind of fun to build something that I've never got to kind of build from scratch.
So our product owner on the project was Nikki, and she is actively the product manager on this application. As you've seen from the previous group, it's an application that the school uses in order to track student assessments and their results. So as a team, we had a lot of fun working on the project, and we learned how to work together remotely using things such as Git and Zoom. So Tyler's going to take it and explain the features that our group added.
At the beginning of our semester, we wanted to follow a few values and goals throughout our project. Our business value was to make an application that allowed the administrative staff and teachers to track evidence of student learning assessments. Our application was made to be easy to use by any user, as well as being cost effective. It is an application that brings the data tracking from pen and paper to an easy to use application. Some extra features we wanted to add was the ability for the administrative staff to upload data, as well as being able to add the ability for additional assessments such as clubs and student associations. Our goal was to create the student learning environment application to be used by WCTC, teacher, staff, and administrative staff. Application gives an organized database of WCTC's schools, departments, programs, and courses, which gives the user the ability to find information they need in an easy to navigate environment. The application pulls data from WCTC's student information system, so most of the school's information is already imported into the application. The application also follows the structure WCTC has already implemented in the database. The data structure is starting with WCTC's multiple schools and then goes into the school's departments and splits off into the specific department's programs on one side and the department's courses, sections, and enrollments on the other. The user can also choose to go into a specific area from our dashboard as well. This gives the user the ability to navigate a complex database in an easy to use application. The student learning environment also allows the user to create new data in all areas, as well as linking them to other parts of the application. The new data will be marked by the application, which helps the website sort out what is added by a user and what was originally in the student information system, which allows a user to see what is new and what was added later on. The application has the functionality to edit the existing data already in the application and track the user who edited the information as well. The application does not allow the user to delete data through the application, however, but allows the user to deactivate the data if it's not being needed anymore. Our business value is, and following that, from what I said, we will hand it over to Kevin and Kayla to talk about our demo.
Thank you, Tyler. So over here, we have the dashboard, admin and faculty dashboard. And below, we have the assessment and user roles, which we inherited. And all our work was embedded on programs and courses. So let's go ahead and start. We put an icon to represent all the pages, school, department, programs, and courses. So every school needs a department, every department needs a program, and every program needs a courses and section. So let's go ahead and start with school. So on click, you have all the listed schools in the database. You can add, view, edit. And we put a function called active and inactive status to replace delete. So let's go ahead and make a new school. So over here, you can add a new school by adding a school name and the active status. If you submit the form empty, there's a form control that stops submission of empty form. So let's go ahead and make a new school called School of Summer with double R. And put a status to no, then submit. So there's a customer's alert that shows the completed task. So you can see at the bottom that what we just added, School of Summer, that shows not active. So meaning the admin can go and change it back anytime. So before we proceed, let me show you how it's gonna be, how it's gonna look like when everything's all set up. Let's go ahead and click on School of Summer Business. So here you can see well the selected item and all the details below it, the active status, when it was last modified, and the admin who modified the school. So below is the department associated to the school. You can add, view, edit. But let's go back and finish up what we just added. So here you can see it's showing false. Let's go ahead and edit. And we change it back to already summer by taking off the R and change the active status to yes and submit. And it's all set. So right now it's all back in the database. So looking at the list, you can see it's all changed. Now it's active. So let's go back to the dashboard to department. This looks similar to school. You can add, view, edit. But I'll just show you the difference between school and department. Let's go ahead and add. On adding, you need the name of the school. You can select from the drop down to make it easy. And this is the only thing that is different. You can select the school from here. Let's go back to the dashboard and select program. Let's click on program. So on program, it looks similar to school and department with few features differentiating it, which is added at the bottom here, the pagination, to help the user access the page easily. And or they can go up at the top, there's a search bar. They can type in a keyword they're looking for. Let's go ahead and type account, enter, and it returns back some data. So you can go ahead and select accounting. Let's view accounting. And these are all the details for the accounting program. You can also edit and do the same features as school and department. Thank you. I'll be handing over to Kayla to finish it up.
Thanks, Kevin. After Kevin's demonstration of schools, departments, and programs, I'll lead you through the courses, sections, and enrollments part. Throughout this demo, you will see a structure where a course includes many sections, and there will be a list of enrollments on each section. So let's go ahead and click on the courses. The user will be directed to the courses page, which shows a list of all courses, including banner and non-banner ones. We decided to display the courses number and name for a user-friendly purpose. At the top of the page, we have a search bar, which works similarly to the program page, allowing users to search for the name and the number of the courses. Another difference on this page is we added the filter function. Users are able to filter the courses by the department they are associated to and by their status of being banner or non-banner courses. So now I'll go ahead and filter the list of course by the accounting department. And there you go. Now the system provided you the result list of the courses that are associated to the accounting department. For the courses page, we also have the add new course and edit the existing course function, but because it works the same to other pages, so I will not be covering those two functions, and I will just go straight ahead and view the accounting spreadsheets. So getting to the view page, we are seeing the details of the course, including which department it belongs to and the list of the sections it has. In the list of the sections, the details of the section are displaying, including their CRN, the semester which the section will be conducted, and the lead instructor who manages the section. So you can see in the lead instructor, if it is not set to a course, it will just display unknown. And let's go ahead and add a new section. So because we are creating this section for the accounting spreadsheets course, so you can see here the course name is already populated. And the other thing is the user is allowed to set the lead instructor by selecting directly from the drop-down list, or they can make use of the search function that we implemented, and they can search for the lead instructor first name, last name, and their ID. And I will set the CRN of this section to 10 and select the semester is for 1920. And the begin date, we implemented the date picker, and I'll set it to today. And the end date would be at the end of the month. And by default, this section is set to not canceled, and I'll go ahead and submit the form. So by submitting the form, you now can see the section that I just created, and we'll go ahead and view the section. So similar to other view pages, what we have here is the details of the section, including the list of the enrollment, which is the list of the students who enrolled to this section. In this list, there are students' ID, their full name, and their enrollment status that are displayed. So I will go ahead and let's say that this section is canceled before the end date. I will just simply click edit and set the status of being canceled to yes. By submitting, you can see now the end date should change to today. So after creating and modifying the section, let's go ahead and add a new enrollment by clicking enroll student. And the model will pop up, allowing user to add a new enrollment by the student ID. So I will go ahead and enter the student ID 000 237 576. Click add. And you can see up here, the student ID first name, last name, and their ID is show up. If I want to get rid of this student, I can just simply click to the minus button. And there you go, the student is now deleted. And I'll go ahead and add another student, the first one with this ID 000 925 485. Click add, and another one 000 659 823. Click add, and by submitting the form, the system will edit the students that we just add there into the enrollment list, and their enrollment status will be set to enrolled. So if the lead instructor want to drop, let's say the first student out of the section, they can just simply hit withdraw button. And now you can see their status is set to dropped. So that is the end of our demonstration. I will leave the stage to Sam. Sam, we're not hearing you.
So in summary, we developed a series of admin screens for administrators such as Randy in order to help manage the school's many courses and adjacent data types. So some of the things we learned while we were working on this project, we learned how to use an established code base and use it as a stepping stone in order to create more functionality with the app. This allowed us to take a project that was already in progress, like many places in the workforce will have us do, and learn how to add new functionality to it. We use Razor and .NET MVC to create the functionality of this application. And we also learn how to work as a team through collaborating with Zoom, Git, things like Fork in order to achieve our goals remotely. Thank you for watching our presentation. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Actually, I have a question, Kim Ehlert. So one of the screens you had when you were working with courses was filter by whether or not it's a banner course. Can you explain what you mean by that?
So the banner courses it's a separate process of importing the data from the school's from the school's data. So obviously there's already a list of all the courses and whatnot in a separate database. So there's a separate process from this that Nikki was working with that will take the data from that and put it into it already. So the banner courses are done through that process. So anything that we would add would be considered a non-banner course.
Okay, so something that wasn't pulled in through that banner import, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I just was having a hard time picturing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I kind of have a follow-up. This is Randy. I have kind of a follow-up to Kim's question there. So all of the college courses and sections are automatically pulled in with the actual enrollments as well. So all of that is already ready to go. And that's just a matter of getting the assessments set up and scheduled, then using this system. One of the needs that we have at the college is for non-course related assessments. An example might be extracurricular activities where maybe student services wants to set up an assessment for a non-defined group of students. So they might have like their SGA, student government students, who maybe want to set up some kind of an assessment for them. So they would have to actually build a course and then actually populate that roster of students using this interface. So it looks like this would work really well for that. Is that kind of the thinking behind this, the non-banner courses?
Yeah, that was exactly sort of what the goal of us was, to be able to, for the admins like yourself, to be able to add things such as the student associations or clubs, any type of assessment like that. I believe that there's already a way to add from previous semesters assessments already, so that you could then link them with the other groups' screens too.
So in relation to that, we have an example of our nursing program where students go out, they graduate, they go out and they take their board exam. It's called the NCLEX. We don't get those results back for months after the students have graduated and left. And that assessment is not really tied to a particular CRN. So in fact, what we would have to do is set up a non-banner course, manually build that roster out so that we would have a course section in essence to facilitate the assessment. So again, I think this works really well. One of the suggestions I might have for your group is to think about building that roster by allowing some kind of a file batch process rather than one user or a student ID at a time, because we may get a list of 75 or 100 students who have completed that assessment, and now we need to build this roster. And it would be pretty tedious, obviously, to go through and have to build a roster that big. So a simple, like setting up a CSV where you could do a batch load of those student ID numbers would be really cool.
Yeah, that definitely.
Suggestion.
You can go, Ken.
Oh, I just said that. Thank you for the suggestion.
It sounds like a cool idea.
Yeah.
One other thought in terms of and I don't know if you want to go back to your main console interface. In working with the assessment group previous semester, they moved to a cascading menu-based system for editing, kind of a hierarchy like you've got set up for your area under programs and courses. So if you go to that area, you'll see schools. Really, again, it's a hierarchy. So you've got your schools, your departments, your programs, your courses and sections. So this would actually work very nicely as kind of a cascading menu where you could open and collapse these things and then add to them without having these segregated into separate menus and areas. Because what we found in that assessment rubric system was there's a lot of clicking up and down to do maintenance on this when it's set up in segregated categories like this. So just, I don't know what your thoughts are about that kind of a user interface here.
Well, one of our thoughts with the design for this interface was through the schools, if you were to need to edit something, say like the School of Business, that you could then edit to the departments from here and so on and so forth into it. And if you were going to specifically go into, say, just a program to edit, you can go to it from this screen. If you knew like your target, whichever program it was that you needed to change something on. That was our system, or our thought behind the setting up the interface this way.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. This is nice for doing that maintenance to build out the structure of the college and build those relationships. So this is, I like this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this group? We still got a couple minutes for questions if there are any.
What was the biggest technical challenge your group encountered, and how did you overcome it?
GitHub. A lot of our issues that we had, for some reason, when some of us would upload to GitHub, it would either remove some of the data that was already placed, copy some of the data wrong, or merge weirdly. So it took us a little bit to get everything to work, but in the end, we were able to kind of transfer it in. We created a new branch that worked a lot better, and it was able to become one big working project by the end.
I do think one of the technical issues that we had the most was version control, and at first working together, especially remotely, how to manage that when we really hadn't worked on a group project as big as this with more than one other person at a time. So managing 4 different people's code was definitely a technology thing that we had to learn a little bit more on the fly.
And there was no documentation when we took over. So it took us a little bit of time to understand what was going on before we can start.
Any other questions at all anybody has for our group?
Thank you, everyone. Nice job.
So much for the questions.
All right. Well, that concludes our capstone presentations for this semester. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you coming and your feedback and your questions for our students. It really helps to enrich the educational experience for them when they can hear real life questions and work on real world projects. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns, feedback for any of us? This is our first time doing this remotely via Zoom, and it seems to have worked out really well.
Yeah, I would just like to shout out to the students. I think they did an awesome job presenting, showing their facts. I see Abby smiling over there. You guys did a great job. It's nice to kind of see you build upon what you keep learning in all the classes. So you should be very proud of what you guys came up with through the past, how many weeks? 16 weeks, 8 weeks? Seems like we've been doing this for a long time. So great job.
Yeah, I'd like to give compliments to all of the students as well. I've been on a million Zoom meetings over the last couple of months. This is probably the best meeting I've been on, the greatest facilitation and very professional presentations. Awesome job.
Very professional. Wow.
Yep. I'd like to thank all of you. The students, you did a fantastic job. Well organized, well orchestrated. Nikki, Matt, I know you worked hard with these students to make sure that it was seamless, and I think it came off very well. Very nice job. Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to say to the students, I saw you last week, and you guys were prepared for that. There was things to talk about, and you guys improved. This is great. I've seen a lot of webinars, but I've never seen 5 presentations by over 20 people. And I'm really, really happy with what I saw tonight. Good job, team.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback, and thanks, Nikki and Matt.
Thank you very much.
Well, we'll stick around for a little bit if anybody's got questions, but at this point you can feel free to drop off. Just one more note for our students. Matt and I will be working on grades on Monday, so don't expect to see anything